these persecuted people fled Switzerland, and they finally made it to England, where they became known as Baptists. So you can see that the Presbyterians and the Baptists have a real connection. Even to this day, many Baptists are more Calvinist than they are in line with any kind of Orthodox Christian teaching. Among them was a man by the name of Arminius, who went even farther and rejected many of the doctrines of Calvin and said, it is our own choice to believe in God, and that's why we need to preach the gospel so people can choose to accept Jesus in their heart or not. The Arminians, then, were part of the Baptist movement, and when they got to England, where there was more religious freedom under Elizabeth I, they really took root. But even then, they were persecuted. Now, let's go to England. So now we have the Church, the Roman Catholic Church, Lutheranism, Calvinism. Now come down from Calvinism and you'll find the Anabaptists, or the rebaptizers, the Mennonites, who then, when they got to England, became known as Baptists. Well, when they got to England, they found that there was a reform movement going on in England in order to supplant many of the changes that had occurred and corruptions that had occurred in the English church established by Henry VIII. These people were called Puritans. They wanted to purify the church. They wanted to rid the English church of any of its corruptions. And so they were known as Puritans. So the Puritans found a lot of togetherness, I guess you would say, with the Baptists and the Anabaptists and the Mennonites. But as they began to preach all over England, the English church that had fought long and hard to have a single prayer book and a single church began to persecute the Puritans and all the rest. At that time, they decided to leave England and come to the United States. Now, listen very carefully. When these groups came to the United States, there was religious freedom established in the United States. But at first it wasn't so. The Puritans came and established their own religious system in the United States. The Roman Catholics could barely get a foothold, except in Maryland. And the Baptists found a foothold in Rhode Island. And so even in America, there were still conflicting and fighting views over what the Bible meant, who Jesus was, what he did, and how we get it. And those are the three main questions: who Jesus is, what he did, and how we get it. How we get whatever the benefit of what he did. When they got to America, as America evolved and established a constitution, religious freedom was created. Now let's take just a moment here and go back to England. Among those people in England who were trying their best to get rid of the abuses that had formed in the church that was created by King Henry VIII, there were some people by the name of John and Charles Wesley. And John and Charles Wesley, who were Arminians, who believed that you actually had a choice, you could choose Jesus or not, depending on what you felt like doing, not whether you were elect. They did not believe in original sin. They believed in original propensity. They decided that the important thing of the Christian life was to live in a righteous way, to get rid of all sin and become sinless, live a sinless life. And they created what was called Methodism. They had a method for being holy. It's called the Book of Discipline. And they created the Book of Discipline, which was their method for being holy. They left England and came over to the United States, where religious freedom had truly taken hold. In Europe, what was going on? The Church of England was getting rid of all of its malcontents. The Switzerland and France became highly influenced by Calvinism. Germany, still influenced by Lutheranism. But the Lutherans did not immediately come to America. They stayed in Germany, and they fought for the truth still in the Germany that was uniting from its various states on the secular model. In the meantime, the Roman Church was severely crippled, but together with Spain, went on ventures to South America and overcame the Aztecs and began to get a foothold in South America, Central America, and Mexico. And so Spain, Portugal, and together in league with the Pope, began to spread Catholicism all over South America and Central America and Mexico, where these things are, where the Roman Catholic Church is still extremely strong. The Roman Church had a counter-reformation to try and upset and overtake all of this cacophony of new thinking and to reestablish the Roman Church wherever it could. But America was the linchpin, because in America, anybody could preach anything. And so the Methodists started moving across the United States, preaching the method of discipline to become holy and to choose Jesus and to live a holy life. The Presbyterians showed up over there and began to establish the Presbyterian Church. And they established universities, and these groups established schools. Some of them will really ring a bell: Yale, Harvard, many others. And so the Methodists started sweeping across the United States. The Baptists did especially well preaching across the southern United States, establishing churches all over the South, and the Baptist Church is still extremely strong there. The Roman Catholic Church had a very difficult time getting a foothold, but the Church of England, or the Church of England, the Episcopalian Church, got a fantastic hold in Virginia, and in fact was the state church of Virginia for a while, until religious freedom was proclaimed through the Constitution. And so the Church of England, or the Episcopal Church, got a stronghold and was known as the Church of the Elite, or the Church of the Educated. Now, in the middle of all of this, with the Baptists running across the South preaching that you could choose Jesus and be baptized by immersion, no sprinkling now, but by immersion, and were non-creedal. They did not believe in any creeds. The Athanasian, the Nicene, the Apostles, none of them. They said, we read the Bible and only the Bible, and everyone can interpret it for themselves. Well, of course, that led to split among split among split, so there are hundreds of different Baptist denominations to this day. The Methodists swept across the United States. They did very well in the Midwest and very well as they went across the country. The Methodists got a fantastic stronghold in the Midwest. And then the reformations kept happening. The changes kept happening. Because in the United States, you could preach anything. There was a group called the Campbellites, which later became the Church of Christ. It was during this time of tumult and doctrines being preached on every corner that Joseph Smith arose and started the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and finally wound up assassinated in Nauvoo, Illinois, and in Carthage, and finally the church moved out to Utah, which wasn't even a state at the time, in order to escape the persecution, because Mormonism was not all that popular among the movements. The Roman Church, the entire time, the Roman Catholic Church was still trying to set up hospitals and to set up churches wherever they could in the United States. And so the Methodists, the Baptists, the Calvinists, and the Church of England all came to the United States, all because of Martin Luther. Remember, there was one Christian church. Martin Luther questioned it. When he questioned it, the Pope revolted against the questioning, did not appreciate it at all. And that conflict led to the states of Europe that were sick and tired of the Pope being in charge of them too anyway, They were rising nationalism. They began to resist the Pope on a secular level, while these reformers, namely Martin Luther and Philip Melanchthon and all the reformers in Germany, insisted on the church being cleansed. Martin Luther did not want the entire church removed. He did not want the Roman churches torn down. He wanted the church to be cleansed. He did not want it destroyed. John Calvin was different. John Calvin wanted it to be destroyed. And if you look at a Calvinist church, if you look at any sort of Presbyterian church, you will see that there is not an altar like there is in a Roman church or a Lutheran church. There is not a divided chancel. Usually the choir is up front. Usually the pulpit's in the center. All of this was because they were making a statement that under Christianity, under the Athanasian Creed, the Nicene Creed, and the Apostles' Creed, the center of the entire religion was God moving toward man. But with Calvin, with the Anabaptists, with the Mennonites, who are now the Amish, who settled in the Midwest and the East and did quite well, they believed that men could go to God. Not God coming to men, but men coming to God. And so these denominations began to sweep the United States, and they broke into a million pieces. At first, there were Methodist churches all over the country, and then they became the United Methodists, then the Free Methodists, and the Evangelical Methodists. Go ahead and look in the phone book. You'll see how many different sects have broken off that call themselves Methodists. The same thing with Baptists. They're independent Baptists, free will Baptists. There are Baptists all over the place with different names, titles, and emphases. Always. Because when there is no creed, when there is no codification, when there is no solid, united teaching that everyone can agree upon in writing, this is the cacophony you get. And this is what we have in America right now, today. And then something happened. The Lutherans got in trouble in Germany because the ruler in Germany, as the states began to unify, wanted the Calvinists there, because the Calvinists had infiltrated Germany. He wanted the Calvinists there together with the Lutherans who were there to merge. Well, the true Lutherans knew they could never go along with the Calvinistic ideas, the ideas of John Calvin and his institutes. They could never accept the teaching of John Calvin, because John Calvin did not believe that the body and blood of Christ were truly in, with, and under, and around the bread and wine in the Holy Supper. And he also believed that some people were born to be sent into hell and some were born to go to heaven. No matter what you did or how you tried, you were either up or down, and it was God's predestination. And the Lutherans could never live with that. But when the secular powers tried to force them to merge, they rebelled. And many of those Lutherans in the early 1800s got up from Germany, abandoned house and home, and migrated to the United States. When the Lutherans got to the United States, they got immense land grants all over the East Coast, also the Midwest, mostly the Midwest and the upper Midwest, and the states of North and South Dakota and those great territories. And the Lutherans settled there. The Lutherans of Scandinavia settled there. The Lutherans of Germany settled there also. And they began to form their own groups, synods, or walking togethers. One of the largest was founded in St. Louis by C.F.W. Walther and some other preachers who were of the same mind, who had migrated from Germany to escape the unification and created what we know today as the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Many of the other Lutherans joined together to create the American Lutheran Church and the Lutheran Church of America. And finally, they decided to merge to become the ELCA. So today there are two major synods. There are many other synods of Lutherans in the United States, just like there are many different versions of the Baptists and different versions of the Methodists and different versions of the Calvinists and different versions of the Church of England and different versions of the Roman Catholic Church. There's even a Reformed Catholic Church, too, and the African American Episcopal Church.